The small hearing room was packed with angry homeowners, many clutching folders full of bogus fines and threatening letters. Karen sat at the defendant's table, her usually pristine appearance showing cracks. Her blazer was wrinkled, her makeup smudged. The board's chairwoman didn't mince words. Mrs. Peaton, theariation. Evidence presented shows a clear pattern of fraud and abuse of power. Effective immediately, the Penura Ridge Lakeside HOA is ordered to cease and desist all activities related to properties outside its original boundaries. Furthermore, all fines and dues collected from these properties must be refunded with interest. But they weren't done. Additionally, this matter has been referred to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Forging official documents is a felony in this state. The sound Karen made was somewhere between a gasp and a scream. You can't do this. I've worked for years to maintain property values. These people don't understand what it takes to run a proper community. Mrs. Peaton, the chairwoman said coldly, you've extorted money from dozens of families under false pretenses. You're lucky if fraud charges are all you're facing. The hearing room erupted in applause as Karen was escorted out by sheriff's deputies. But the best part came 2 weeks later when the official charges were filed. 37 counts of fraud, 1 count of racketeering, and multiple counts of falsifying documents. Sarah and I were sitting on our porch enjoying a quiet evening when the news broke. Our neighbor Tom had texted us, "Turn on Channel 9, you're going to want to see this." The reporter stood outside the courthouse, wind whipping her hair. In a stunning development, former HOA President Karen Peaton has been found guilty on all counts. The judge has sentenced her to 5 years in prison and ordered her to pay $450,000 in restitution to affected homeowners. The camera cut to footage of Karen being led away in handcuffs, her perfect facade completely shattered. Her face was a mask of shock and disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend how her little empire had crumbled so spectacularly. "I'm innocent," she screamed at the cameras. "They don't understand. Without me, property values will plummet. The community will fall apart." But no one was listening anymore. Her reign of terror was over, ended not by revolution, but by the simple act of someone standing up and saying, "Enough." The last image before the news cut to commercial was Karen stumbling on the courthouse steps, her heels snapping as she was led to a waiting police car. I politely told her this was private property. She scoffed and said, "Everything within Oak Ridge Estates falls under HOA governance." That night, I dug out Grandpa's boxes. What I found made me chuckle aloud. Not only did I own the pond and surrounding 20 acres free and clear, but the original survey showed that Oak Ridge Estates' HOA had been using about 2 acres of my land for their community walking path without permission or payment for the past decade. I consulted with my lawyer friend, James Morrison, who confirmed what I suspected. The HOA had no legal claim to my property whatsoever. "Let them dig their own hole," he said with an amused tone. "Document everything." So I did. Every time Karen trespassed, every threatening letter about violations, every time she stood at my property line with her phone recording my infractions, I documented it all. 3 weeks ago, she sent a formal notice threatening legal action if I didn't comply with HOA regulations. That's when I decided to throw a barbecue. The Memorial Day Pond Barbecue invitation went out to all my actual neighbours, not through HOA channels, but personal invitations to the 30 families I'd known for years. I made it clear this was a private event on private property. 25 families RSVP'd. Yes, eager for a carefree afternoon. I hired a local barbecue truck, set up tables and chairs, and even brought in a small sound system for background music. Everything was perfectly legal and well within county noise ordinances. The party started at 2 p.m. on a beautiful Saturday. Kids were splashing in the shallow end of the pond, adults were enjoying cold drinks and great food, and for the first time in months, our neighborhood felt like a community again. That's when Hurricane Karen arrived. She stormed through the gathered crowd, her face flushed with rage, clipboard clutched like a shield. She shouted over the music that this gathering was unapproved and violated at least 17 HOA regulations. I calmly offered her a burger. This seemed to short-circuit something in her brain. She sputtered for a moment before launching into a tirade about permits, quiet hours, which didn't start until 10 p.m., and something about commercial food vendors. When I continued to grin and suggested she was welcome to join us as my guest, she pulled out her phone with a malicious smile. She announced loudly enough for everyone to hear that she was calling the police for an illegal gathering, noise violations, and unpermitted commercial activity. While we waited for the police, Karen stood at what she believed was the HOA property line, arms crossed, occasionally shouting legal threats at anyone who made eye contact. The party continued, though with an underlying tension. Some neighbours started to pack up their things, worried about police involvement. I told everyone to relax and quietly retrieved my folder from inside. James had prepared everything meticulously: original deeds, surveys, tax records, and a beautifully drafted cease and desist letter. The first officer to approach was Sergeant Wallace, a tall man with warm eyes who I'd actually met before at community events. He walked up to me first, probably because I was calmly flipping burgers while Karen was practically vibrating with rage behind him. He asked with a professional tone if I was the property owner and what seemed to be the issue. I explained that we were having a private gathering on my property and that the HOA president believed she had authority here. I handed him the folder. As Sergeant Wallace looked through the documents, 2 other officers were taking Karen's statement. I could hear her angry voice carrying across the yard, throwing around terms like criminal trespass and public nuisance. The sergeant's expression changed as he read through the papers. He called over Officer Bennett, and they spent a few minutes comparing the survey maps to something on their patrol car's computer. The transformation was striking. Sergeant Wallace walked back to where Karen was still ranting to the other officers and had a quiet word with them. Then he approached Karen directly. I couldn't hear the initial exchange, but I saw the exact moment her confidence evaporated. Her mouth fell open, she shook her head violently, and then her voice rose to a pitch that probably disturbed dogs 3 neighborhoods over. She screamed that this was impossible, that the HOA had authority here. Sergeant Wallace returned to me with the other officers. He confirmed that, according to all official records, not only was the pond and surrounding area my private property, but the HOA had been trespassing on my land for years. He asked, with a slightly amused tone, if I wanted to press charges for trespassing or harassment. I said not at this time, but handed him the cease and desist letter to serve as a witness. Karen tried to storm over, but was politely blocked by Officer Bennett. What happened next was glorious. Sergeant Wallace officially served Karen with the cease and desist letter, reading key portions aloud. The letter demanded that the HOA immediately stop claiming authority over my property, remove any HOA markers or signs from my land within 7 days, and cease all harassment. It also noted that the walking path the HOA had been using was on my property, and continued use would require a formal easement agreement. Karen's face cycled through several colors: red, white, purple, and finally a concerning grey. She sputtered about lawyers, about her authority, about how this was impossible. The officers informed her that filing a false police report was a misdemeanor and suggested she leave the property immediately. As she turned to go, she shouted that this wasn't over, that the HOA would sue me into bankruptcy. Sergeant Wallace quietly reminded her that harassment was also a crime. The rest of the barbecue was spectacular. Word spread quickly through the gathering, and suddenly everyone was asking to see the surveys. My neighbour Tom, who'd been fined $300 for having the wrong shade of beige on his mailbox, actually started crying with relief. The music seemed louder, the food tasted better, and kids who'd been afraid to play too loudly were now having cannonball contests in the pond. 3 days later, I received an emergency letter from the HOA's lawyer attempting to dispute the property lines. James responded with a comprehensive package that included not only our documents, but also a calculation of 10 years of unauthorized use of my land. The monetary value was substantial. He also included photos of Karen's multiple trespassing incidents and transcripts of her threats. The HOA's lawyer withdrew the challenge within 48 hours. The emergency HOA meeting the following Tuesday was standing room only. I didn't attend. I wasn't a member after all, but Tom gave me a play-by-play. Karen tried to spin the situation, claiming she was protecting the community's interests. When the board treasurer revealed that fighting the property dispute could cost the HOA over $200,000 in legal fees alone, not counting potential damages for trespassing, the room erupted. Homeowners who'd been silent for years suddenly found their voices. The vote of no confidence was swift and brutal, 38-2, with Karen's only supporters being her vice president and a woman who everyone suspected was her sister. As the results were read, Karen stood up, her face twisted with fury, and declared that we were all going to regret this, that she knew people, that she would make our lives miserable. The board president, Tom, quietly reminded her that threats during an official meeting were being recorded and could be used as evidence. But the real justice came 2 weeks later. It turns out Karen worked as a compliance officer for a regional bank. Someone, honestly, I don't know who, sent her employer a video compilation of her threatening behavior, trespassing, and abuse of power. Banks tend to frown on employees who demonstrate such poor judgment and potential legal liability. She was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. The final blow came when the county sheriff's office, reviewing the false report she'd filed, decided to charge her with misuse of emergency services, a misdemeanor that carries a fine of up to $5,000. When she was served with a summons at what used to be her HOA president's parking spot, witnesses say she simply sat in her car and stared at the paper for 20 minutes before driving away. The look on her face, according to Tom, who saw it all from his driveway, was one of complete and utter defeat, as if she'd finally realized that her reign of terror hadn't made her powerful. It had just made her a criminal with a pending court date and a $5,000 fine looming over her.